Everyone, this is Nathan Broeckelman, and this is my AEP 855 case study when ethics and policies collide. So the first thing we're going to do here is look at the summarize of the study. So James is a student who was brought up in a rough lifestyle, and he had David, who's an honor student, hold some brass knuckles for him so he could use them later after school. Now, a teacher witnessed this, and both were escorted to Mr. Inman's office. Mr. Inman's also known as Richard in this case study, and Richard has formed a pretty good relationship with James and some of the other Southside students. He was from the South Side as well, so he's really trying to reach those kids, and sounds like he's doing a pretty good job, at least according to this case study. So when Mr. Inman or Richard got this report, he had the school resource officer escort both kids down to the office. And then they found brass knuckles when they searched David, and James admitted that he was the one that gave David the knuckles. So that means both James and David were handcuffed and taken to the detention facility. The school's policy has a zero tolerance when it comes to illegal items on school grounds, so both boys were to receive 45 days expulsion. But Richard did not want to see this ruin David's life, so he chose not to write the expulsion paperwork for David, but he did for James, which resulted in him getting a reprimand. So some legal and ethical issues. Here's the legal issues. The only legal issue I could find was the fact that James brought brass knuckles to school, and then he gave them to David to hold. This resulted in an arrest for both James and David. Ethically, Richard went against the board policy, which he did not agree with. This is an ethical issue as he's not following the policy that the board has, even though he does not feel like this is fair to David. So my one-word synthesis is Richard has to decide whether to follow through with punishing both boys per board policy for possessing the brass knuckles, or only punishing James, who admitted that it was his fault, and receiving a reprimand which would protect David. So some facts that we know. The people involved is Richard, the assistant principal, David, the honor student, James, tough kid from the South Side, David's mom, James's mom, the teacher that reported the incident, the SRO, and the director of secondary education, who called and said he was going to give him a reprimand if he didn't do the expulsion. Some unknown is who the head principal is, and if there's any other principals in the building, and even some racial demographics would be nice as far as just kind of knowing the background of everything. Not that race really has anything to do with anything, but just to kind of see what kind of school and social economical stuff you're working with. The place is Rocket Junior High School, excuse me. It has approximately 900 students, and it's in the springtime. Now, what's unknown is, I said size of a school, but as far as meaning, which I touch on this later too, is it just 7 and 8, or is it a different grade levels, and also the size of the town / city that it is in, or is it a suburb or rural, or is it a urban? Now, the program at the junior high school has honors classes. It also has an alternative education for disciplinary students, so it kind of makes you wonder maybe if they have that alternative school, maybe it is a little bit rougher of a town or school. What's unknown, like I said earlier, is the grade level. Is it 6 to 8? Is it 6 to 9, 7 to 9, or is it just 7 to 8? I don't know if I've ever seen any 6 to 9s, but I've heard there's some out there. But most commonly, 7 to 8 is common in the bigger schools with 900 kids, but it could easily be 6 to 8 as well. And also, is it public or private? So prioritizing. This situation currently is damaging to David, who was caught in the middle of an illegal situation involving brass knuckles. This decision to not expel him could be damaging to Richard's relationship with James and other Southside students, as well as the community of the South Side. What individuals and groups have an important stake in the outcome? Richard, David, and James have the most important stakes in the outcome. For James, this is a path that he had been down before, but for David, this could change his future drastically. And then for Richard, he might not have backing from the board if he stays with his decision, or possibly need to be searching for a new job, and the reprimand is going to be in his personal file as well. I feel like all the stakeholders have been consulted except the head principal. I'm not really sure where he's at in this picture. Usually a situation like that, you'd think the head principal would be involved. I think being able to discuss with the other principals, or maybe just the head principal, would help with the situation. and I do not feel like there is necessarily enough information to make a good decision, but we're going to do our best to do that. So the 3 options I came up with is just staying with the decision of not filing expulsion papers for David, still staying with the decision, standing his ground, and try and change the policy in the future. And then option 3 is fill out the paperwork for David's expulsion and also try and change the policy. So evaluating these 3 options. Option 1, stay with the decision of not filling expulsion papers for David. Pros, he's looking out for David's future. David's a good kid. He's an honor student, so he's trying to help him out there. Cons, receive a reprimand that goes in his personal file. We also might lose that relationship with James and possibly the rest of the Southside students. So that could be a big community side of things. So that he could start getting more disciplinary issues from those students that live on the South Side. Option 2, he still stands his ground and tries to change the policy. He's looking out for David's future still, and pro is another potential change to the zero tolerance policy. Cons, he still receives a reprimand that goes in his personal file, and he'll still probably lose relationship status with James and some other Southside students. Option 3, both students are treated fairly according to the board's policy. Potential of a policy change. Southside community may gain more respect for treating students' punishment equally. Cons, David's future may be in jeopardy, David's parents may be angry, and the school board may not want a policy change. This was a tough decision, but I feel like filling out the paperwork for David's expulsion and try and change the policy is the best decision. Again, I felt like this was a really tough decision, but I feel like this is what's best. Ultimately, if David is an honor student, this one decision will not determine the rest of his life. It might hurt him for some scholarship opportunities, etc. But if he's in junior high, I think a lot of times they would maybe take that in consideration, the age that he's at. But in the grand scheme of things, I really don't think getting in trouble now is going to hurt him at the end. It might make him think twice about his decision when he's put in a similar situation. James and the Southside community will also see that Richard supports everybody and treats everyone fairly. And trying to get the policy change is the biggest issue here. I do not like zero policy rules, as every situation is different. Had Richard gone and got the students himself without the SRR, he maybe could have handled it differently. But again, that might question his ethics as well, especially his integrity. So if I were to implement this, first I would call David's mom to let her know that I am going to sign the expulsion paperwork, that I had changed my mind. And I would definitely let her know that I'm requesting a policy change. And if she would like to maybe help request, maybe she could be a good member of a committee to help you change that policy. So then I would sign the paperwork and I would request a policy change to the board, or at least a hearing about it. You don't want to go demanding things from the school board because that doesn't get you anywhere. So requesting a policy change. After I get permission to go about the policy change, hopefully I get permission. If I don't get permission, I would probably still seek to change the policy. I just have to fight the board a little bit harder. But hopefully the school board's open to some change, or at least open to hearing change. Then I need to gather information for a policy change and form a committee possibly to help build a new policy to propose. Then I would propose this new policy working with the board to come up with what is best for students. Hopefully we get the new policy passed, and then we can just look forward to the next situation. There's my reference for this case study. And finally, my reflection. Now, I learned that decision making can be very difficult, and you will never be able to make everyone happy from this assignment. I also think looking at this case study will help prepare me for a situation that may be similar to this. Zero tolerance policies are rough, and as an administrator, you need to make sure you are well versed in what policies you have. This could be prevented had Richard tried changing the policy prior to this happening. He could have also handled it without the resource officer, but then his ethics would be questioned as well. As an administrator, you will have to have a firm background and make sure to stand on what you believe in. If those beliefs differ from your schools, you may have to find a job elsewhere or try and see if policies can be changed. Now, going back a little bit, I really do feel for David here. He's a good student, but overall, students make mistakes. And it doesn't matter whether you're an honor student and you live in the rich part of town, or your parents are well off, or if you're like James and you live on the South Side where you live a little rougher life. Ultimately, we have to do what's best for all kids, not just the ones that are in the honor system or that are the good students. I do think this mistake can hurt David, but I honestly think it's going to help him for the better if this was situation had arise. But I also think consulting the head principal in a situation like this, especially if you're just the assistant, or even if you are the head principal, associating with you or asking for some advice or bouncing some ideas off your assistant principals or superintendent would probably help make sure that you can make the best decision involving a situation like this. So that is the end of my presentation. I enjoyed this class, and I hope that I get to see the rest of you in some future classes. Thank you.